Have you ever felt like asking for help meant you were failing your family? The question echoed through Ariella Mancini's mind as she stood in her tiny kitchen, staring at an overflowing sink, hands trembling just above the soapy water. Outside, São Paulo's morning cacophony filtered through the kitchen window. The rapid-fire horns of buses tangled in early rush hour, neighbors calling hurried goodbyes in the corridor, the dull metallic clatter of a distant construction site. The city was alive, relentless, and in that moment, Ariella felt every beat of its pulse weighing down on her shoulders. The apartment was a modest two-bedroom on the fourth floor, its walls painted a soft, optimistic yellow that seemed to fade a little more each year. The kitchen, though neat, was cramped and cluttered with evidence of yet another rushed breakfast. A glass of orange juice left half-finished, the crusts of Louisa's toast, a sticky trail of jam across the counter. Ariella's reflection flickered in the window, dark circles under her eyes, strands of hair escaping her ponytail, lips pressed into a thin line of determination. Behind her, Louisa's backpack thudded onto the couch with the weight of a 10-year-old's world. "My, where are my gym shoes?" Louisa's voice, bright and searching, cut through the anxious symphony of the morning. Ariella wiped her hands on a dish towel, forcing a smile as she turned. "Didn't you leave them by the door, querida? Check again." Her voice was gentle, but there was an unmistakable edge, an undercurrent of urgency she tried to keep hidden. Louisa, perceptive beyond her years, paused. She watched her mother, brow furrowing. "Are you okay? You look tired." Ariella's smile stiffened. "I'm fine, amore. Just a busy morning, that's all." She leaned down to tie Louisa's shoelaces with practiced efficiency, her fingers moving quickly, almost mechanically. "Let's not be late for school, okay?" Enzo's footsteps echoed from the hallway, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in a crisp blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a phone pressed between his ear and shoulder. His hair was still damp from the shower, and he gave Ariella a quick, apologetic glance as he ended his call. "Bom dia, meninas," he said, planting a kiss on Ariella's cheek, then another on Louisa's forehead. "I have to run. The site meeting got moved up." He grabbed a banana from the fruit bowl and his briefcase from the counter in one motion, his movements fluid and practiced. Ariella nodded, hiding the pang of disappointment at his hurried departure. "Have a good day, Enzo. Don't forget to eat something real for lunch." He grinned, the lines around his eyes deepening. "You know me, Ari. I'll try." Then he was gone, the apartment door closing quietly behind him. For a moment, the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant city noise. Ariella exhaled, her shoulders slumping. The morning rush was not new, but lately it had felt heavier, every task a little harder, every minute stretched a little thinner. She looked at the calendar pinned to the fridge, her own handwriting filling every square. Doctor's appointments, bill due dates, Louisa's school events, grocery lists. Some squares had tiny exclamation points, reminders of things she'd already forgotten once before. The list of chores in her mind seemed endless. Laundry to fold, bills to pay, dinner to plan, emails from Louisa's teachers to answer, and the ever-present nagging feeling that she was letting something slip. Louisa returned, shoes finally on, hair in its usual loose braid. She tugged at Ariella's sleeve, her eyes wide and earnest. "My, I can help with breakfast tomorrow. Maybe I can make toast, or pour the juice." Ariella hesitated, wanting to accept, but pride and habit held her back. "Thank you, querida, but I've got it. You just worry about your schoolwork." She reached out to smooth Louisa's hair, her fingers lingering a moment too long, as if to reassure herself. They left the apartment together, the door clicking shut behind them. In the corridor, Mrs. Dalva-Torres, their neighbor, was watering her potted plants, her gray hair pulled into a tidy bun. She smiled warmly at Ariella and Louisa, her eyes kind and watchful. "Bom dia, Ariella. Early start today?" Mrs. Dalva's voice carried the calm of someone who had seen many mornings just like this. Ariella returned the smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You know how it is, Dona Dalva. School waits for no one." Mrs. Dalva's gaze lingered just a second longer than usual, as if she could see the fatigue Ariella tried so hard to hide, but she said nothing more. Instead, she offered Louisa a piece of homemade banana bread, wrapped neatly in wax paper. "Thank you," Louisa beamed, cheeks flushed with gratitude. Ariella nodded her thanks as well, feeling a twist of guilt. She remembered promising herself last week that she'd bake something for Mrs. Dalva in return, but she'd never found the time. The elevator was slow, as always. Inside, Ariella pressed the ground floor button and watched the numbers descend. The city below was waking up, the bakery across the street, the bus stop crowded with commuters, the ever-present buzz of São Paulo's energy. She loved this city, its chaos and color, but some days it felt like she was swimming upstream. At the school gate, Louisa hugged her mother tightly before joining her friends. "Bye, Mai, don't forget, teacher said we need to bring an old magazine for art tomorrow." Ariella nodded, mentally adding it to her growing list. "I'll remember. Have a good day, meu amor." As she walked back home, the sky already warming to a pale blue, Ariella's thoughts raced. She replayed the morning's small failures. The forgotten gym shoes, the argument with Enzo last night about the water bill, the nagging sense that she'd missed something important. She tried to shake it off. After all, every family had mornings like this. But lately, the cracks were becoming harder to ignore. Back in the apartment, the silence was overwhelming. She put on a playlist of soft bossa nova to fill the space as she tackled the dishes, wiping down surfaces and folding laundry with methodical precision. She prided herself on her efficiency, her ability to keep the household running smoothly. But even as she moved from room to room, she could feel exhaustion tugging at her limbs, her mind foggy and slow. She sat at the small desk in the living room to pay bills online. The numbers on the screen blurred together, and she realized with a jolt that she'd forgotten to transfer money for the school lunch program. She quickly made the payment, hoping it wasn't too late, then scribbled another reminder on her calendar. The phone rang, a call from Dr. Sofia Ribeiro's office, confirming Louisa's annual checkup. Ariella thanked the receptionist, making a note on her ever-growing list. She'd missed last year's appointment, rescheduling 3 times before finally giving up. The guilt lingered. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Mrs. Dalva once again, holding a small bag of groceries. "I had some extra fruit from the market. Thought you might like some," Mrs. Dalva said, her tone light, but her eyes searching Ariella's face. "Oh, thank you, Mrs. Dalva, but you shouldn't have," Ariella replied, forcing a smile. "We have more than enough." Mrs. Dalva hesitated, then nodded. "Well, if you ever need anything at all, you know where I am." Ariella closed the door gently, leaning against it for a moment. She felt the kindness in Mrs. Dalva's gesture, but accepting help, even something so small, felt like admitting defeat. She shook her head, returning to her chores. The afternoon brought more of the same, sorting laundry, preparing lunch, checking homework assignments. The apartment felt smaller with each passing hour, the walls inching closer as the sun moved across the sky. She glanced at her phone, noticing 3 unread messages from Enzo. Apologies for being late, reminders about the plumber, a note about dinner plans. She answered each one with cheerful brevity, masking her true feelings. By the time Louisa returned from school, the apartment was spotless, dinner simmering on the stove. But Ariella's hands trembled as she set the table, her mind replaying the day's endless march of tasks. Louisa sat at the table watching her mother with quiet concern. Are you sure you don't want help? I can set the table, or maybe we can cook together." Ariella hesitated, feeling the old familiar surge of pride and fear. She wanted to say yes, to let her daughter take on a little responsibility, to share the load, even if just for a moment. But the words caught in her throat. "I'm okay, Louisa." "Thank you, though." She reached out, squeezing Louisa's hand. "You just focus on being a kid." As the sun dipped below the city skyline, washing the apartment in golden light, Ariella sat at the window, watching the traffic snake its way through the city below. She could see parents collecting children from the playground, neighbors chatting on balconies, the rhythm of daily life unfolding all around her. It was beautiful, in its way, but also isolating. The truth was, Ariella was tired. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She felt the weight of unspoken expectations pressing down on her, to be the perfect mother, the supportive wife, the efficient homemaker. She had always believed that asking for help was a sign of weakness, that admitting she couldn't do it all would mean she was failing her family. But as the city lights flickered on and the apartment settled into evening quiet, Ariella wondered, just for a moment, what it would feel like to let someone in, to say, "I need help," and trust that it didn't make her less. The question lingered in the air, unanswered as night fell over São Paulo. Ariella's morning had unraveled in a familiar, exhausting rhythm, a rhythm she knew too well but could no longer keep in time with. The kitchen, still echoing with the sound of Louisa's hurried footsteps and Enzo's quick muffled goodbye, felt strangely silent now. Sunlight slanted through the window blinds, painting stripes across the pile of breakfast dishes and the small mountain of laundry that waited by the door. She wiped her hands on her apron and tried to steady her breathing, but her mind spun with the day's demands. Groceries, bills, cleaning, errands, and somehow squeezing in a moment to check Louisa's homework. Ariella moved mechanically, stacking plates, rinsing glasses, her movements efficient but brittle. She caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the microwave. Dark circles beneath her eyes, jaw tight with tension. Pride had always been her armor. She was the glue that held her family together, the caretaker who never wavered. But lately, she felt like a glass about to crack. Each new task another drop filling her to the brim. The apartment was modest but warm. Framed family photos above the dining table, potted herbs on the windowsill, Louisa's latest drawing magnetized to the fridge. It was a space shaped by love and effort, but lately, the edges felt sharper, the clutter more overwhelming. Even the city outside seemed to press in on her, its constant movement a reminder of her own restlessness. She was organizing Louisa's backpack for the afternoon when the first real disruption of the day struck. From the kitchen, a sudden, sharp hiss. Then the unmistakable sound of water hitting the floor. Ariella spun around, heart pounding. The pipe beneath the sink, already patched once before, had burst. Water pooled rapidly across the tiles, soaking into the hem of her pants. She dropped to her knees, fumbling with the valve beneath the sink. Her hands, slippery with soap and nerves, struggled to find purchase. After several frantic seconds, she managed to twist the valve shut, stopping the flow. Silence, except for her own ragged breathing and the slow drip of water echoing in the cabinet. Ariella sat back on her heels, overwhelmed. The pipe was just one more thing, a little failure that felt like proof she wasn't managing. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes, fighting the sting of tears. She didn't have time to cry. She grabbed a towel, mopping up the mess, and tried to push the worry aside. There were errands to run, bills to pay, and lunch to make. She'd deal with the pipe later. As she hustled to pack Louisa's lunch, her mind flitted from one task to the next. She checked the fridge, nearly out of milk. The clock on the wall ticked ominously. She had just enough time to run to the bakery before picking up Louisa from school. She scribbled a quick list and rushed out the door, keys jangling, heart heavy. The corridor was already humming with the midday energy of the building. Mrs. Delva Torres was watering the orchids on her windowsill, a gentle smile creasing her face. "Bom dia, Ariella," Mrs. Delva greeted, her voice warm. "You look a bit rushed today. Everything all right?" Ariella forced a smile, clutching her grocery list tighter. "Oh, just a busy morning. You know how it is. Always something to do." Mrs. Delva's eyes twinkled with knowing concern. "If you ever need a hand, you only have to ask. I'm not as quick as I once was, but I make a mean cup of coffee and I'm a good listener." Ariella's cheeks flushed. She shook her head, brushing off the offer politely. "Thank you, truly, but I'm fine. Just one of those days." As she hurried down the stairs, Ariella couldn't shake the feeling that accepting help would be admitting defeat. She pictured Enzo, always so busy at his architecture firm, coming home drained but proud of her for keeping the house running smoothly. She didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want Louisa to worry. She needed to be enough. The bakery was crowded, the scent of fresh bread and coffee swirling in the air. Ariella waited in line, scanning her phone for reminders. A flashing notification caught her eye. Electricity bill overdue. She winced, realizing she'd meant to pay it last week. Another forgotten task. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Louisa's school, reminding parents about a field trip. Ariella's thumb hovered over the screen. She was sure she'd signed the permission slip, but couldn't quite remember. By the time she got home, arms heavy with groceries, she was fighting back a headache. The apartment was thick with afternoon heat. The kitchen floor was still damp from the pipe incident, and Louisa's lunchbox sat untouched on the counter. Ariella's heart skipped. Had she forgotten to pack it? She checked her phone, 2 missed calls from the school. Panic rose in her chest. She dialed the school, apologizing profusely, her voice trembling. The secretary reassured her that Louisa had shared snacks with a friend, but the guilt gnawed at Ariella. One more thing she'd dropped. One more proof, she thought, that she was slipping. She moved on to prepare dinner, hands moving automatically as she sliced onions and garlic. The apartment filled with the familiar aroma of her mother's old recipes, but there was no comfort in it today. She turned to stir the sauce, distracted, and the hot oil sputtered. Pain flared across her hand, a sharp, burning sting. She jerked her hand back, nearly dropping the spoon. Cursing under her breath, she ran to the sink and thrust her hand under cold water. Tears pricked at her eyes, not just from the burn, but from the accumulation of small failures, aches, and worries that she'd carried for months. Enzo called to say he'd be home late. He sounded tired but light, promising to bring dessert. Ariella said nothing about the pipe, or the lunch, or the burn. She didn't want to add to his stress. After hanging up, she slipped a bandage over her hand and returned to the stove, determined to finish dinner. When Louisa came home, she found her mother hunched over the kitchen table, sorting through bills. The girl set her backpack down quietly, studying her mother's face. "Mine, are you okay?" Louisa's voice was soft, tentative. Ariella looked up, forcing a smile. "Of course, Carita, just busy. Did you have a good day at school?" Louisa hesitated, then slid into the chair beside her. "You forgot my lunch today. But it's okay." Sophia shared her sandwich. Ariella's heart twisted. "I'm so sorry, meu amor. I'll do better tomorrow." Louisa squeezed her mother's uninjured hand. "You do a lot already. Maybe you could ask someone for help?" Ariella pulled her hand away gently, busying herself with the stack of envelopes. "No need, really. Things have just been a little hectic. I'm fine, I promise." The evening crept in, the city's noise softening as the sun dipped behind distant apartment blocks. Enzo arrived home, bringing laughter and the sweet scent of brigadeiros, but even his presence couldn't quite chase away the heaviness in Ariella's chest. She smiled, asked about his day, listened to Louisa chatter about her school project, but inside she felt like she was watching her own life from behind glass. Over dinner, Enzo noticed the bandage on her hand. "What happened here?" "Oh, it's nothing," Ariella replied lightly, waving it off. "Just a little kitchen accident." He frowned, concern flickering in his eyes. "Are you sure you're all right? You've seemed tired lately." Ariella bristled, pressing her lips together. "I'm fine, Enzo. Really." He squeezed her shoulder gently but let the matter drop, trusting her word. Later, as he tucked Louisa into bed and Ariella loaded the dishwasher, she felt the weight of his trust pressing on her. She wanted to be the partner he relied on, the mother Louisa could count on. She wanted to be strong. That night, as the city hummed quietly beyond the apartment's thin walls, Ariella lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Exhaustion tugged at her bones, but sleep wouldn't come. She turned over the events of the day in her mind. Every missed step, every mistake, every moment when she could have asked for help and chose not to. The silence of the apartment was both comforting and oppressive. She thought of Mrs. Dalva's gentle offer, the kindness in her eyes, of Louisa's small hand in hers, her daughter's earnest concern. The world wasn't conspiring against her, but she was conspiring against herself, demanding perfection when all anyone wanted was for her to be present, safe, and happy. The next morning dawned hazy, clouds hanging low over São Paulo's skyline. Ariella woke early, determined to get ahead of the day. She made a list, checked it twice, and tried to pace herself, but the world seemed intent on reminding her of her limits. The plumber couldn't come until the following week. The electricity bill was now overdue, and her mother called to remind her about a family lunch on Sunday, another obligation to add to the list. Louisa was unusually quiet at breakfast, watching her mother with worried eyes. Enzo rushed out the door, promising to call the plumber himself, but Ariella knew he'd likely forget amidst meetings and deadlines. She packed Louisa's lunch carefully this time, double-checking everything. After dropping Louisa at school, Ariella passed Mrs. Dalva in the lobby again. The older woman paused, watering can in hand. "Ariella, I made extra soup last night. Let me bring you some for lunch?" Ariella hesitated, torn between gratitude and pride. "That's very kind, but you don't have to. Let me," Mrs. Dalva insisted, her tone gentle but firm. "It's no trouble. I know what it's like, trying to do everything yourself. Sometimes you just need a little help." Ariella swallowed hard, feeling a lump in her throat. She nodded, finally, but still felt that quiet shame creeping in. She wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. She spent the rest of the morning tidying the apartment, her bandaged hand aching. The city's sounds were a constant backdrop. The blare of car horns, the distant echo of laughter, the mechanical thrum of life moving on. She paused at the window, watching people hurry along the street, each carrying their own invisible burdens. When she sat down for lunch, Mrs. Dalva's soup warm and fragrant on the table, Ariella felt a flicker of comfort. But the mountain of tasks still loomed. She paid the overdue bill, called the plumber again, and made a list for the grocery store. She even tried calling 2 friends, but both were busy, their lives as tangled as her own. By late afternoon, Ariella was spent. She sat at the kitchen table, head resting in her hands, the city's golden light filtering through the blinds. She knew she was at a crossroads. She could keep pretending, or she could find the courage to admit she needed help. If you've ever felt like you had to do it all alone, hit subscribe and share your story in the comments below. You're not alone, and sometimes admitting that is the bravest thing you can do. As she waited for Louisa to come home, Ariella watched the city outside, searching for a sign that things could change. The apartment, with all its daily chaos and quiet love, felt a little less heavy, as if a storm were building, waiting for the first brave word to break it. Ariella woke before dawn, though she hadn't truly slept. Her body ached with a tiredness that felt ancient, as if it had settled deep into her bones. The sky outside the window was still a bruised navy, the city murmuring beneath a blanket of darkness. She sat up in bed, watching the ceiling, feeling the weight of another day pressing down before it had even begun. She moved through her morning rituals on autopilot. The kettle whistled, coffee grounds spilled on the counter, left unswept. The bathroom mirror revealed dark circles beneath her eyes, hair pulled back in a hasty knot. She pressed a hand to her chest, willing her heartbeat to slow, but it only thudded harder, an urgent reminder that she was falling behind. Louisa's voice drifted from the bedroom. I can't find my socks." Ariella forced a smile, calling back, "Check in the bottom drawer, querida." She set out breakfast. Toast, papaya, a glass of watered-down juice, then hurried to help Louisa gather her school supplies. The morning unfolded as a series of small crises. The missing socks, an untied shoelace, a spilled cup of juice. Ariella handled each with trembling patience, but her mind spun with the endless list of things still undone. By the time Louisa was ready, Ariella's hands shook as she zipped up her daughter's backpack. "Have a good day, meu amor," she whispered, kissing the top of Louisa's head. She watched her daughter disappear down the corridor, swallowed by the bustle of neighbors and distant elevator chimes. She had 3 hours before Louisa's return, 3 hours to clean the kitchen, pay the overdue internet bill, call the plumber about the leak beneath the sink, and finally, sit for a moment to rest. She started with the dishes, scrubbing furiously, but the water stung her burnt hand, a dull ache from the accident 2 nights before. She ignored the pain. The apartment was silent, save for the persistent drip of the leaking pipe. Each drip was a note in a relentless symphony of things left undone. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and found her phone, dialing the plumber again. Straight to voicemail. She left a message, voice tight with forced cheerfulness, and set the phone down. Bills were scattered across the kitchen table, their white envelopes like small, accusing ghosts. Ariella sorted through them, stacking them by urgency. Electricity, water, school fees. She tried to do the math in her head, but the numbers blurred. She pressed her palms to her temples, breathing hard. The morning sun climbed higher, washing the kitchen in harsh, unforgiving light. Ariella glanced at the clock. Almost noon. She'd lost track of time. Her stomach clenched with anxiety. She still had errands to run. She scrawled a list on a scrap of paper. Groceries, pharmacy, bakery. She grabbed her keys and purse, but as she reached the front door, a wave of dizziness forced her to stop. She leaned against the wall, breathing shallow, the room spinning for a moment. Voices floated up from the courtyard below, laughter and the clang of a metal gate. Ariella steadied herself and stepped outside. The city was alive, the sidewalk crowded with vendors and early lunchgoers. Ariella moved through it like a ghost, eyes downcast, clutching her list. She bought bread and milk, forgot the baking powder, remembered only as she reached the elevator on her return. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the keys. Back in the apartment, she put away the groceries, the simple task feeling monumental. She glanced at the clock again, 1:25 p.m. Louisa's school let out at 1:30. Ariella's heart jumped. She checked her phone, which buzzed silently. 3 missed calls, all from the school. Panic constricted her chest. She dropped her purse on the floor and dialed back, voice shaking. "Hello? This is Ariella Mancini. Mrs. Mancini, this is Secretaria da Escola São Rafael. Louisa is still here. Is everything all right?" Ariella's vision blurred. "Oh, meu Deus, I'm so sorry. I lost track of time. I'll be right there." She hung up, hands clammy, pulse racing. She grabbed her bag and ran, feet pounding down the stairwell, ignoring the ache in her legs. The city rushed past in a haze. Cars, people, the searing heat of early afternoon. She barely noticed the doorman's concerned glance as she burst into the street. Traffic was at a standstill. She tried to hail a taxi, but none stopped. She jogged the 6 blocks to the school, chest burning, sweat stinging her eyes. By the time she arrived, she was gasping for breath. Louisa sat on a bench outside the gate, clutching her backpack, eyes wide with worry. The school secretary stood nearby, arms folded gently. "My!" Louisa cried, her voice trembling. Ariella knelt, gathering Louisa in her arms. "I'm so sorry, meu amor. I'm so sorry." The secretary's voice was kind but firm. "It happens, senora. But please, next time—" "I know. It won't happen again, I promise." Louisa squeezed her hand tightly as they walked home, her small fingers warm and forgiving. Ariella's mind raced with shame and guilt. She wanted to explain, to make Louisa understand, but words failed her. The elevator ride was silent except for the hum of the machinery. When they reached their floor, Ariella unlocked the door with shaking hands. The apartment felt even smaller, the walls closing in. Enzo was home, his jacket slung over a chair, eyes filled with concern. "Ari, the school called me. I left work early. What happened?" Ariella's voice cracked. I forgot. I lost track of time. I'm so sorry." Enzo crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "You don't have to do everything alone, amore. Talk to me." She wanted to tell him, to spill everything. The exhaustion, the fear, the endless weight of responsibility. But her throat closed. She shook her head, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Louisa hovered nearby, watching with anxious eyes. Are you sick? Are you mad at me?" Ariella knelt so she was eye level with her daughter. "No, Carita, I'm just tired. It's not your fault. I love you." A knock rattled the door. Mrs. Dalvatore stood in the hallway, a Tupperware of homemade empado in her hands, her eyes gentle behind thick glasses. "I heard some commotion," Mrs. Dalva said softly. "Is everything all right?" Ariella tried to muster a smile, but her lips trembled. Enzo led Louisa to her room, whispering reassurances, while Mrs. Dalva stepped inside and closed the door gently behind her. The apartment felt suspended, as if time had paused. The late afternoon sun threw golden rectangles across the worn wooden floor. Mrs. Dalva placed the empado on the counter and turned to Ariella. "Sit with me for a minute?" Her voice was warm, patient. Ariella nodded, sinking into a chair. Her hands twisted in her lap. Mrs. Dalva poured 2 glasses of water. "Sometimes, when I was your age, I thought I had to do everything by myself. I remember once after my husband died, I tried to keep the whole house running. I wouldn't let anyone help. It nearly broke me." Ariella's breath hitched. She stared at the swirling patterns on the tablecloth. "But you always seem so strong." Mrs. Dalva smiled softly. "Strength isn't doing it all alone. Sometimes it's knowing when to let others in." The room was quiet, save for the distant hum of São Paulo's traffic. Enzo returned, worry etched on his face. "I called Dr. Sophia. She's coming over." Ariella started to protest, but Mrs. Dalva squeezed her hand. "It's all right to need help, Carita." Within half an hour, Dr. Sophia Ribeiro arrived, her calm presence filling the room. She set her bag on the table and pulled up a chair. Her eyes were clear, direct, but kind. "Ariella, Enzo told me what happened," Dr. Sophia said quietly. "How are you feeling?" Ariella hesitated, the words tangled inside her. She wiped her eyes and shook her head. "I don't know. Everything feels Too much. I'm tired all the time, I can't keep up. And today, her voice broke. I forgot my own daughter. Doctor, Sophia's tone was gentle but firm. You're not alone in this, Ariella. Being overwhelmed doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. You need to rest and you need support. Ariella looked from Dr. Sophia to Mrs. Dalva, then at Enzo, whose eyes were wet with worry but full of love. Louisa peeked from the bedroom door, her small face full of hope. For a long moment, Ariella said nothing. The city's noise faded, replaced by the steady beat of her heart. She took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. I need help. The words hung in the air, fragile but powerful. Enzo knelt beside her, taking her hand. We're here, Ari. We'll figure this out together. Mrs. Dalva squeezed her shoulder, nodding. Let me help you, dear. I mean it. I can take Louisa to school some mornings, help with shopping. And you, she looked at Louisa, who nodded eagerly, can help your mother with little things. Set the table, fold laundry. That's how families work. Ariella's tears returned, but this time they felt lighter, as though the burden she'd carried alone was finally beginning to lift. Dr. Sophia smiled, reassuring. The first step is always the hardest. But you've taken it. Ariella nodded, overwhelmed by relief, gratitude, and a trembling hope. For the first time in months, she felt the possibility of rest, of sharing the load, of being enough, even in her vulnerability. The sun slipped lower, painting the kitchen in honey-colored light. Ariella sat surrounded by her family and her neighbor, the city's distant roar now softened by laughter, gentle voices, and the quiet promise that she didn't have to do it all alone. She looked at each of them, her voice steadier now. Thank you. Truly. I can't do this by myself, but maybe together. She trailed off, but the meaning hung clear between them. A fragile, beautiful turning point. For the first time, Ariella allowed herself to hope. Ariella sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon sunlight slanting through the window and warming her face. The chaos of the previous days, her trembling hands over the sink, the forgotten school pickup, the mounting bills and broken pipes, felt distant now, as if she were looking back on someone else's life. But the memories were hers, every ache and exhaustion still lingering in her muscles. Louisa's laughter drifted in from the living room, mingling with the low hum of a distant bus. The apartment was calmer, less frantic than it had been in weeks. Ariella glanced down at her notebook, a fresh page, the first in months not filled with to-do lists or urgent reminders. Instead, she'd written a single phrase in careful, looping script. It's okay to need help. A cup of chamomile tea steamed gently in her hands, the scent soothing. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself a rare pause. For so long, she'd believed that rest was indulgence, that asking for help was an admission of weakness. But in the quiet aftermath of her breakdown, Ariella felt something shifting. A small but unmistakable sense of relief, even pride, that she'd finally spoken the words she'd buried inside for years. The turning point had come the evening before, when Enzo and Louisa had returned home. Ariella's tears had spilled out unbidden, and for the first time in her adult life, she hadn't tried to hide them. Enzo had knelt beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. We're a team, Ari, he'd whispered, his own eyes shining with concern. You don't have to do this alone. None of us do. Mrs. Dalva's visit had brought unexpected comfort. The older woman had sat with Ariella in the soft glow of the kitchen lamp, her stories of past struggles and resilience weaving a quiet solidarity between them. Everyone needs a hand sometimes, Carita, Mrs. Dalva had said, patting her arm, and there's no shame in that. In fact, there's strength. Dr. Sophia's words echoed in Ariella's mind as well. The family doctor's visit had been brief but meaningful, her practical, compassionate presence, a balm to Ariella's guilt. You are not less for needing support, she'd said firmly. You are human. You are a mother, yes, but you are also Ariella. You matter too. Now, in the gentle hush of her kitchen, Ariella reflected on how everything had changed in such a short span. It wasn't just the external help, though Mrs. Dalva's daily visits and Enzo's new efforts to share the household load meant the world. It was the permission she'd finally given herself to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, to say, I can't do it all. She glanced over at Louisa, who was coloring at the coffee table, the tip of her tongue peeking out in concentration. Ariella remembered the look on her daughter's face the night before, fearful at first, then relieved when she realized her mother wasn't angry or upset with anyone but herself. Louisa had crawled into Ariella's lap and hugged her tight, whispering, "It's okay, Mama. We can help you." That moment of tenderness had cracked something open inside Ariella. She realized, with a bittersweet pang, that her daughter didn't need a perfect mother, just one who was present, gentle, and honest. The apartment was far from spotless. A basket of unfolded laundry perched on the arm of the sofa, and the leaky kitchen pipe still needed a proper fix. But the atmosphere was lighter, the relentless tension gone. Enzo had started coming home earlier, setting aside his work emails to help with dinner or take Louisa for a walk. Mrs. Dalva had insisted on bringing over homemade pão de queijo, the scent filling the apartment and drawing laughter from all three generations gathered around the table. And, in a small but significant shift, Ariella had accepted Louisa's offers to help, letting her set the table, feed the cat, even try her hand at folding towels. The tasks took longer this way, but the togetherness mattered more than the efficiency. On Sunday morning, Ariella took a walk with Mrs. Dalva through the leafy streets surrounding their apartment building. They paused in the tiny neighborhood park, watching children play on the swings while vendors sold coconut water from a cart. The city, always bustling, felt less oppressive now, its noise and movement part of the background, not the weight pressing on her chest. "I used to think I had to be Superwoman," Ariella admitted, her voice soft but steady. "That if I asked for help, I was failing. But I see now, it's the asking that takes real courage." Mrs. Dalva smiled, lines crinkling around her eyes. "Sometimes, all it takes is one honest moment. You've given your family a gift, Ariella. You showed them it's okay to be real." The two women sat in companionable silence, the warmth of the morning sun on their backs. Ariella felt her shoulders relax, the tension melting away. She realized she'd started breathing more deeply, more freely than she had in years. That afternoon, Enzo surprised Ariella by suggesting a quiet family dinner out, a simple meal at their favorite trattoria a few blocks away. The three of them lingered over plates of pasta, Louisa telling stories about her school day, while Enzo and Ariella exchanged knowing glances. For the first time in a long while, Ariella didn't feel the need to rush home to chores or worry about tomorrow's list. Later, as they strolled back through the city's evening bustle, Louisa slipped her hand into Ariella's. "I like it when we do things together," her daughter said, voice small but earnest. Ariella squeezed her hand, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "Me too, meu amor. Me too." The days that followed weren't perfect. There were still moments of stress, times when Ariella felt the old urge to shoulder everything alone. But she was learning, slowly, patiently, to pause, breathe, and reach out. Sometimes that meant texting Mrs. Dalva to pick up a loaf of bread. Other times, it simply meant sitting down with Enzo at the end of a long day and sharing her worries, rather than swallowing them. The changes weren't just in Ariella. Enzo grew more attentive, listening without trying to fix every problem. Louisa blossomed with the new responsibilities, her confidence growing as she contributed to the family. Even Mrs. Dalva, who had sometimes felt lonely since retiring, found new purpose in the daily rhythms of the Mancini household. One rainy evening, as the family gathered to watch a movie, Ariella paused to look around the living room. The soft glow of the lamp illuminated Enzo's profile, Louisa's smile, the gentle rise and fall of their breathing. She realized she felt content, not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer carrying it all alone. She thought back to the question that had haunted her at the story's beginning. Have you ever felt like asking for help meant you were failing your family? Now, she understood the answer. Asking for help was not failure. It was love. It was trust. It was the beginning of something stronger than pride. A real, resilient family. Ariella reached for her phone and, almost on impulse, opened the Notepad app. She began typing, wanting to remember everything she was feeling in this moment. It's okay to need help. It's okay to say I can't do it all. Real strength is letting others in. She set the phone aside, a quiet smile on her lips. So, if you've ever been in Ariella's place, juggling too much, afraid to speak up, convinced that needing support means you're not enough, know this. You are not alone. It takes courage to raise your hand and say, I need help. It takes strength to let your loved ones see you, not just at your best, but at your most human. What about you? Have you ever struggled to ask for help? Or maybe you've been the one to offer support, like Mrs. Dalva or Enzo. Share your story in the comments below. Let's remind each other that none of us are perfect, and that's more than okay. If Ariella's journey resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. There's power in sharing, in community, and in knowing we're all in this together. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for a little help.